Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Hello, hello, guys. So yeah, for this last panel, we will talk about chain abstraction. It's not the easiest subject, but I'm sure that with those guys, we will provide you good insights and I hope good answers. So if you could just introduce yourself very briefly, and after I have many questions for all of you. And yeah, I'm Raphaël Bloch, one of the co-founder of The Big Whale, which is a European crypto media in French and also in English. If you want to start.
Sure, yeah, so my name is Ethan, although I go by the alias Tabasco online. I lead developer relations at Particle Network. And the kind of TLDR of what we do at Particle is that we build a technology called universal accounts, which essentially gives users the ability to have one account and one balance that's usable across any chain. So I can have USDC and ETH from Arbitrum and Base and Polygon and actually use this anywhere, including Cosmos chains, Solana, other EVM chains. I don't need a bridge or really manage my multi-chain balances. I simply have one balance that's usable everywhere. So this is what we're building at Particle.
Thanks.
I am Ollie, and I am also developer relations, so always good to sit with another DevRel. And I'm with the Interchain Foundation, and yeah, focused on defragmenting the DevX in the coming months. Yeah, wow. That's me.
Cool.
And hi, I'm Rowland. I'm technically actually a product director, but I also run DevRel in an interim capacity, so I have them add that to my title. So I'm at Agoric, and we are launching orchestration, which is, as a lot of you have likely heard a lot today and at the Chain Abstraction Day, really trying to solve for chain abstraction in a similar and related way to Particle Network, but with a different twist. And you'll see that across a bunch of chain abstraction related organizations. And I'll stop there, but lots more to say about what we're doing.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name's Joe. I'm the co-founder of Mystic Labs. I'm not in DevRel, although I do everything. We're building Calypso as well as DeFund Finance, which are products to abstract assets across different chains and make it easier for new users to come into the space.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like to start with a very simple question. What is chain abstraction and why is it so important? I mean, from the beginning, we didn't talk about this, and now we see that with account abstraction, chain abstraction, we need to do something. So just maybe, Ethan, if you want to start on this.
This is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
What is chain abstraction? I think it's actually a harder question than some people say. It's actually, there's not a whole lot of social consensus just yet, but I think at Particle, we introduced actually a definition to chain abstraction a few weeks back, which is a user experience exempt from the manual processes required to interact with multiple chains. And so these processes include bridging and managing multiple balances and stuff like this. The reason for this stems from the issue that today, especially as we move towards a future in which we'll have hundreds, thousands of blockchains, this kind of roll-up-centric future, the user experience is continually fragmented, and this means that users have to cognitively manage their balances across multiple different chains. So if I use an application on Base, and then I want to go use a different application on Polygon, then I want to go use some rollup and some appchain, then now I have 4 balances that I'm now managing as a user, and this is a lot that we ask for users. And then furthermore, if we want them to then move between these chains and these applications, and now they need a bridge, and now even that is a lot to ask as well, because bridging is complicated, it can be not very secure. We're just introducing complexity to the user experience, and this is getting worse and worse as we introduce more chains into the mix. So this is where the need for abstracting these multi-chain processes from the user experience comes into play. And this is what chain abstraction ultimately aims to do. It aims to remove everything that ultimately users, and as we'll get into in a bit, I assume, even developers have to do to really manage and use multiple chains. So what you're going to see as a result of chain abstraction, and it's sometimes easier to understand it as what it'll enable, is that users are going to be universalized. So users can use applications from any chain. They don't need to know where their balances are. They don't need to know how to get balances across chains. Users just simply use applications. And developers will be able to build applications that can exist simultaneously across multiple different chains. Developers are not confined to any single blockchain. So this is where we're going to move away from really being siloed to individual chains from both the user and the developer standpoint, and being a far more unified ecosystem. So I'm very excited for it. I think it's one of the most important narratives of this year.
Yeah, we will come back on this after. which complexities do you remove with chain abstraction? I mean, what's the main goal? This.
Well, so I mean, firstly, I like your definition of it there, Ethan, and right now, if you open an app on your phone, for the most part, you have no idea what kind of database they're using for whatever app that might be. Any number of the technology stack that exists in Web 2, and I think that's just going to become a part of the Web 3 way that users, and I'm going to keep bringing it back to UX and users, A, because I think that's what chain abstraction does really well, and B, because we talk about it a lot, but we should still be talking about it more than we do. But yeah, abstracting away in the same way that we do with Web 2 from the users having no idea if it's a MongoDB, MySQL, or a cockroach, we won't have any idea how many different chains we're interacting with right down on the base level. And users will hopefully just have a really good experience while also having a better internet.
And just actually, I like the fact that you outlined the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. Web 2, yeah, it's less transparent, and what we like in the blockchain is that it's transparent. So how to find the right balance between transparency and also the fact that, we don't want people to understand everything because it's too complicated, maybe?
Yeah, and a lot of responses there. I think to speak to that last point, there is a population of people that care deeply about security trade-offs between blockchains, and that population of people is this population of people, right? We have already saturated, I think, or close, that group of people that care or care to care about that difference. And so when I think about chain abstraction, what I think about is not hiding that or making that impossible to understand. What I think about is giving developers and the builders of applications the ability to make those choices on behalf of their end users. I remember in 2021, I sent my dad some Solana, and I tried to get him to download a Phantom wallet. And he programmed in the 60s, he had punch cards, we had computers growing up, he could not figure that out. And the idea that he's gonna care that his USDC is on Solana versus some ETH2 versus some Cosmos chain is just completely ludicrous. And so if we really want to get to the mainstream, we need to understand the world is gonna be multi-chain. It already is, even if you're only looking at the Ethereum ecosystem, the L2 explosion is a terrible UX challenge. This is the reality, and so developers and application builders need to be able to solve that problem on behalf of their users.
Thanks.
Kind of backing off of what everybody said, I'm going to kind of focus on the user too, as Ollie said. But I like to use analogies, and I bring the analogy back to what JavaScript and Ajax really did in the early 2000s, even 1990s, and what that blossomed and allowed for a lot of people to build for people and what we use in our everyday lives. And what that did is it allowed a lot of people that before would not really be able to use a lot of these internet-based products to actually be able to use them. And I think that's kind of the route that chain abstraction is going down. And once you hit that, you can actually take your products and cater them towards an audience that knows nothing about crypto, but might just want to be on it because it's a cheaper way for me to invest in this asset, or it's a faster way for me to transfer or pay this person.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to clarify. We're talking about kind of this future of multi-chain and there being a lot of rollups and app chains and the Cosmos ecosystem and the Ethereum ecosystem. I think this is actually so it presents a challenge, and this is what chain abstraction needs to solve. But at the same time, I think it's actually a good thing, and that as an ecosystem, to some degree, we've matured past the idea that there's going to be one blockchain that everybody will use. And not to put down the Solana guys too much, but I think for most of us, there's this idea of app chains and L2s and application-specific rollups and things like this. And of course, the Cosmos ecosystem has been doing this for a long time. And so I think that this is the fact that we're moving this direction infrastructurally and that we're starting to really see this materialize is great. But for this type of scaling to actually be implemented practically, you need chain abstractions. Chain abstraction is actually non-negotiable because if you don't have some degree of abstraction within this user experience, then actually having usage across these chains and these app chains and whatnot is very difficult. And so this is why chain abstraction, this is ultimately why I mentioned earlier that I believe it's the most important narrative this year, because we're starting to see this thesis really materialize very quickly. This is why chain abstraction is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree with that a lot, especially because it's right now in the space currently, it's a big competition of liquidity.
Yep.
And if you have more and more chains launching, you're going to spread liquidity really thin across all those chains, and it just becomes unusable.
Yeah, so we have bridges, also solutions like layer 0, stuff like this. What's, according to you, the best solution for chain abstraction?
So I'll jump in. For me, chain abstraction requires a bunch of different solutions, and it may, depending on the experience you're trying to provide, you may be doing multiple different things. So count abstraction, being able to do bridging, cross-chain, interop. From the Agoric side, orchestration is something different, where you're able to continue executing or execute on a timer that allows you to do complex, robust things cross-chain that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. I think it's not so much that there are these competing solutions and one will emerge the victor. It is, these are pieces of a puzzle that get put together depending on the experience you're trying to provide. And in particular, you know, I think I love what Tabasco said was around, this is really a problem that exists because we have been successful at a previous problem, which was sort of, how does the world of blockchains expand? How can new blockchains launch with new functionality? You know, these solutions will come together to provide that. And yeah, it's a puzzle.
Yeah, this is exactly true in that, like, chain abstraction overall, and this is the way that, like, the vertical has kind of been emerging, especially in recent times, is that chain abstraction is a stack of solutions that create what is a chain abstracted experience. In this way, I don't think it's necessarily like right to say like there's one specific approach to chain abstraction, because actually chain abstraction requires multiple different approaches that, you know, like was said, kind of change depending upon the implementation, the application, and stuff like that. So it depends on the scenario. You know, we actually recently have been kind of like looking at the chain abstraction stack and defining it in essentially 3 core layers, which is blockchain level chain abstractions, so things like ag layer, even like IBC could be to some degree, you know, understood as like this intrinsic interoperability. Then you have account level chain abstraction, which is what we build at Particle Network. This is universal accounts, or things that give users one point of access they can use everywhere, or one balance that they can use everywhere. Then you have application level chain abstraction, which is things like giving developers the ability to then compose and orchestrate across multiple different chains simultaneously. And so you need ideally these three types of solutions working together within a single experience to create what is a truly chain abstracted experience. Because chain abstraction is a very ambitious thing. It's something that's, you know, this goal is relatively difficult to achieve at an ecosystem level. This is why you need this kind of, you know, a collection of multiple different solutions working in almost a layered format to really achieve the experience that, you know, we're all kind of gunning for here.
But still, we don't have any universal wallet. We need to use bridges, and we know that it's not so easy. And we have so many blockchains. So how to find the right path between these fragmented markets, and also the fact that we still want a multi-chain future.
Yeah, I think that's one of the toughest parts of it, is that we're building systems where we want sovereignty, we want control over all of the systems in their own homes, but we need the UX to be able to unify all of that. And that's also like translating that to Web 2 again. That's something that the Web 2 world doesn't have to deal with as much. They've got all of the vertical integration for themselves. That means, okay, they only have to ever look at one database rather than trying to aggregate the same number of different databases, technologies, interoperability protocols that we're trying to do. I'm hoping that we can rally around certain components that make it easier, mainly for developers probably, because that's going to lead to a better UX for end users. Hopefully, the TCP IP of the interchain, being IBC, allows us to at least have some level of standardization, but even that, there will be more than that, just that. And I mean, it must be a really difficult problem for you guys who are like actively working on this as your day-to-day, trying to basically restream in all of these different pieces while still giving the same UX grade that people know from where to.
So I'm going to jump in ahead of Joe, but I think I want to give him a chance to shill Calypso a little bit, because I think some of this conversation has been a little bit abstract, not to borrow, sorry about the pun, but going through a concrete example of what's really meant here would be valuable, because as you mentioned, multiple wallets, multiple bridges, the idea is the user shouldn't need to know about that, and if they want to be using one wallet, they can continue doing that without having to move to other wallets, without having to even know that they're bridging. And so, what's a Calypso flow?
So before I get into that, this one thing before people forget, I just want to jump on that Ollie mentioned. One thing I agree with mostly everything you said. There's one thing I actually disagree with, and I think that's been the problem with chain abstraction. I think instead of focusing on developers and what developers need to build around it, I think it actually has to go backwards, and you need to find a problem that the users are actually facing, and then backtrack into what the developers need to actually solve that problem. Now into Calypso and the user flow, specifically on that. So I think to solve, when it comes to with the wallets, it comes down to interoperability. And I'm going to shill IBC as well, so if there's any IBC haters, sorry. But I think that IBC is that solution. I think it has proven that over and over and over again for the last many years. And I think that by using a combination of ICA and ICQ and just expanding that into these various other chains that just don't have that direct IBC support, actually solves that wallet fragmentation problem. And I think it also solves a lot of the other problems simultaneously at the same time. And that's what we're doing at Calypso.
I love IBC as well. Unfortunately, at Particle, we will have Cosmos support. Right now, we're mostly on EVM, which means that we have to. EVM is not as sophisticated as Cosmos, unfortunately. So this means that we have to find interesting workarounds. So we use a solver system essentially to move funds across chains, which allows us to do so in a way that's cheap and efficient. But I'm excited for things like Polymer and whatnot that will allow us to use IBC on other chains. So you guys are very lucky that you have this amazing technology, and we have to find workarounds for it on Ethereum. But we use solvers and intent-based systems at Particle.
Yeah. And I mean, jump on your point. Don't you think that because blockchain is also a matter of network, you want to leverage the network, and most of the users are more on EVM blockchains. So why don't you, and sorry to be a little bit rude, but why don't you just build something where people are? And you see what I mean?
So, okay, and it's good that Dean's not on this panel. I replaced him. He has like a 20-minute rant on EVM. So I will skip that. But I think there is a little bit of an element of EVM has a network effect within the crypto space as it has existed so far, which is still really small. And that network effect, in my view, is in large part because it has been very difficult. Like, Ethereum was sort of the first smart contracting framework, language, chain. All these assets flowed in, got very valuable. Many people got rich. Then there was sort of the ICO boom, and so you have all these assets that got created on Ethereum, and it was actually very difficult for them to onboard, and so to leave, right? And so as a result, you have this network effect because it has been hard to leave. As we get to the point where onboarding to a new protocol is as simple as one click, even though you've got to do 3 bridging steps and 1 swap in between, but the user doesn't know that, all of a sudden, users who are using DeFi applications, that lock-in for Ethereum doesn't feel so strong anymore, and you have assets that can much more easily free flow. I think that world starts to look very different in terms of what actually constitutes a network effect within crypto. And so, I think but again, coming back to it from the Agoric side, we are still enabling orchestration between EVM chains. And that is a core goal for us coming into Q3, is sort of launching how can we do this where a user from an Ethereum L2 moves to another Ethereum L2 and doesn't know that those assets get routed through an Agoric contract in the background. It just happens to be the easiest way to accomplish that. That is absolutely sort of part of chain abstraction. But I think we just kind of have to recognize there are going to be multiple chains, multiple frameworks, multiple kinds of capabilities in different blockchains. And so we need to build for that world. And whether EVM continues to sort of grow and own the space or not, I don't know. But I think it will look different.
Okay, and on a scale to 1 to 10, where are we on this roadmap?
For Agoric, so we're launching Orchestration Core, which is sort of what Calypso is built on. It can, and you guys are coming from EVM and a lot of your use cases using Axelar. That's going live next week. And then what we are launching in sort of a progressive fashion is APIs that make that dead simple. So Joe had to work with a bunch of low-level structures, and took him longer than it would if we had those APIs ready. Those APIs are coming very soon.
You want to react on this, guys?
I guess I can touch on it. I think, the biggest problem with Ethereum and why not just build on Ethereum is I think part of it is the stuck problem, but I also think part of it is also because there's just so much liquidity that already lives there. A large amount of the usage is on that liquidity that lives there. This is because you have a lot of people that have been in crypto for a very long time. Their funds are parked in Ethereum, mainly because a lot of them made a lot of money on the uptick of Ethereum, as well as Bitcoin, et cetera, a lot of them very early on. And I think as new users flood into the space, and I think that's what chain abstraction really brings and actually helps for, that liquidity actually flows away from Ethereum into other places. And I think that's when the landscape changes entirely.
Yeah.
I think this conversation of like, why not just build on Ethereum? Why not just like, that's where all the users are? I think this is part of the problem that chain abstraction is trying to solve. I think ideally for developers, like in this chain abstraction future, the way that I see it is that developers, it doesn't matter where they build. They can build whatever they want, whatever works best for them. Unfortunately, at the moment, when a developer chooses what chain they want to build on or where, a big part of their decision is liquidity and users and popularity and stuff like this. And I think this is a somewhat convoluted way of looking at things as a developer. And I think that in the future, when we have chain abstraction and users are available from anywhere and developers can compose across any chain, where they build, actually the only factor that matters here is the technology. So what works best for them? This is why, of course, like, you know, I'm sure many builders will start building app chains, and you start using IPC, or they're going to start using like their own, you know, sovereign rollups with Celestia or whatever else it may be. So like, I think this is quite important, that this is going to see a pretty big cultural shift in developers, and that there's no reason, like this whole popularity contest of like where the most liquidity, where the most users are, this is effectively removed with chain abstraction. And developers can truly build anywhere. This is like where you have this saying with Celestia, which is build whatever, wherever. This is like what chain abstraction is now enabling. So I think this is an important part of the conversation, and I'm excited for this change that we'll see with you know, developer choice.
Okay.
And on the developer side, in terms of numbers, we're still super early, like a couple 100 million in Web 2, and it's like 30-odd thousand in Web 3, like working full time. So as they arrive, they're going to need tools to just build for the end user. And in a world where there are many blockchains and interoperability and sovereignty, they will just filter to the mass and be the mass, I guess.
Yeah, I think one aspect of this too is the tribalism within crypto is a sign of a really immature market. And I think it is, for me, it's sort of hard to overstate how weird it looks to the outside, right? And so when you talk to somebody that's coming from the Web 2 space that wants to build, you know, we do have, I've had a lot of conversations where the default is we're going to build on EVM because that's where everybody else is. It's sort of like nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. It's like, I'm not going to be fired for making the wrong tech choice if that's what everybody else did. But really what they want is to make sure that they're building in the place that makes the most sense for them. And a lot of their application may just be a front end that wants to call existing things or something along those lines. And at the end of the day, they don't actually care, right? They don't have some like deep-seated belief that they need to build on Solana or Ethereum. You know, that's for people that have been in the space and frankly gotten rich as a result of that. For the people outside that are coming in later, that just seems very odd.
And maybe Ollie, what's today the main pain points for interoperability between chains, according to you?
So, I mean, well, I'm an IBC maxi, so, and I think, yeah, just in general with the Cosmos ecosystem and the Interchain, there are so many fragmentations to the way things have been built, and the further components of the Interchain stack. So, I always talk about Conway's law, and that's the structure of a software system closely follows the organizational structure of those building it. And that translates into the developer experience as well. So with all of these sovereign, fragmented pieces lying around with a patchwork of efforts for them, that's by Conway's law, created a fragmented developer experience. This is something I think about when I'm asleep at night. Yeah, I think that's what needs a lot of solving. What I really want to be spending, I am spending all of my time on it, and hope that we have a good pathway forward now from the ICF position as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems lie. Again, I'm going to be biased towards IBC because that's what I know mainly. But this actually goes all bridges, all bridging protocols, etc. I think a lot of it has to do with intangibility. A lot of these assets are intangible across different chains. It creates a very, very pressing problem, even as a user, as a developer, everybody in between. I think there's a lot of solutions that are being proposed and are coming out, and I think chain abstraction is one of them, but not the only one. And I think that once that's solved, the intangibility, you can start solving for a lot of the other problems that Ollie was mentioning. And I think that's kind of like the end game when it comes to the problem with interoperability.
So I'll be sort of narrow and concrete. I think there are challenges because this problem is somewhat nascent and the solutions are somewhat nascent. You know, Agoric is already starting to run into the edges of what's possible in interop, and it's like little things like, okay, we did a swap on a remote chain. How many tokens did we get? Oh, we got to send another query for that. Okay, well then that's got all these like downstream implications and all this stuff. And so some of those rough edges, I think, are going to continue to be difficult until they start to get ironed out. And you know, people like those of us in the audience and on the panel are pushing that forward. But yeah, I think there's sort of a lot of that stuff, like failure modes, like, oh, I tried to do a 4-chain action and it failed on chain 3. What state are my assets in, and how do I roll that back? That's like not trivial. And so there are a bunch of those things.
Interesting. You wanted to react? No? Okay, cool. So we have a little bit less than 2 minutes. If you want to ask any question, don't hesitate to raise your hand. Okay. Maybe I have one last question. So, when do you think that we will succeed about chain abstraction? What's the maybe key metric for you?
For me, it's when I can hand my mother and father a phone and tell them to make this trade or stake into this asset, and they can actually, one, initially download the wallet or not have a wallet, and two, actually complete the full thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer to the question. I would largely agree. I think that chain abstraction is one major component, and I think it leads to a larger UX goal of removing a big part of Web3 and the kind of sharp edges of Web3 from the user experience, to where ideally users will be able to use Web3 applications, on-chain applications, without really knowing that it's on-chain. They don't need to deal with the complexities of on-chain today. So I think this is like whenever we start seeing applications that blend in with Web 2 and start to feel just like Web 2, but they're actually on chain and take advantage of the benefits of blockchain. I think that this means that chain abstraction has been successful, and I think that this is actually only possible through scalability through the means of sovereign block space, kind of a rollup-centric future. And then of course this needs to be patched together with chain abstraction to make it actually usable. So I think that if we start to see these types of applications emerge and ideally be successful, I think that this is where chain abstraction has succeeded.
Very shortly.
I'm already seeing consensus here, and can basically say the same thing with different words. But yeah, when someone doesn't know the difference between a Web 2 app and a Web 3 app.
Okay.
From the developer side, when they can build a complex multi-chain application in 4 days on Agoric. That's, professionally, that's what I'm targeting.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.